Thank you for joining the Detroit Buy, Hold, Invest podcast. I'm your host, the self-proclaimed greatest real estate agent in the world, David Rabior, Detroit Buy, Hold, Invest, www.detroitbuyholdinvest.com. Again, David Rabior, Clyde Realty, Detroit doing it real big. And I just wanted to get back to you guys. It is Saturday. It is March 1st. March 1st, everybody. Can you believe it? Time is flying. And I really appreciate all of you guys again for joining the show. Please like, subscribe, follow me on Spotify, and follow me on the Apple and the Amazons and all that good stuff, the YouTubes. Check out my website. Maybe pop me a good review here and there. It really does go a long way, and I really sincerely appreciate anybody who would do that and everybody who listens to me. Never in my life did I think this many people would actually listen to me. I know in my household there's only a few, and they're never listening. They just turn their hearing off most of the time, and I don't blame them. But the topic of this show, the housing crash is here. Or is it not here? Is it? Is it not? What's going on? Are we all going to just peril? Is the whole United States just crumbling, just falling apart? Well, throughout my research in the market of Detroit, is the housing crash here? Absolutely not. The gold rush, ladies and gentlemen, is in Detroit, Michigan, Metro Detroit, Michigan, from Flint to Detroit to Grand Rapids to Port Huron, Kalamazoo, all these, Mount Pleasant. There's so many cool places in Michigan, but particularly we talk about Detroit because that's where I run the streets and that's where I do my business. Detroit, Michigan, Metro Detroit, Michigan, Wayne, Oakland, Macomb counties. That's where I mostly do my bidding. And then I also run up into St. Clair County, Sanilac County, Huron County. I've done a few things in Tuscola County, but hey, there's only one me and there's only so much ground I can cover. And there's only so many people that I really want to commit to working with to help them as an investor. But is the housing crash happening? I've been, looking around and watching some YouTubes here and there, reading a lot of articles, and, the momentum for Detroit, if you're not in on Detroit or you're just getting in on Detroit or you've been here for a long time, ladies and gentlemen, this is the time. This is the time. The biggest wealth transfer, they keep talking about this, is here. It's coming. We have the boomers that are, fading into the next chapter of their life, and there's a lot of transitioning that's going to be had here via the stock market and crypto and the real estate markets, and people passing away and leaving their wealth to their loved ones and whatnot. And this is the time for you as a person who is an adult who thinks further than just your paycheck every Friday or every 2 weeks on whatever day you get paid. Does it really matter? This is the time for you to take a look at your life and take a look at what you have in front of you and think about what the future is for you and what you believe that it should be and how you're going to get there and all that good stuff. And as I look around the country, I get a chance to see what goes on here in the Detroit market every single day and selling, literally hundreds of properties a year myself. And then my brokerage, Clyde Realty, selling, upwards of 1,000 properties. Looking at that in real time for what I do, what they do, what we do together. It is, it's definitely indicating of a boom here in the Detroit market. The thing is that, there's a lot of things that have gotten in the way of investors and how they invest and the challenges that come with that, things such as the mortgage interest rates right now for a non-primary, an investor trying to buy a non-primary home, secondary investment in whatever capacity that could be. It could be Airbnb, it could be single family, multifamily, it could be, commercial lending. The rates are extremely high. And the rates being extremely high create a situation where investors have to be way more conscious about what they do on the purchase end and then what they do as far as the improvements go, and also how it's all going to shake out when you start including property tax After the properties on cap here, after the first year, they go up significantly based on, the previous owner and what they paid, and if they were a primary homeowner with the homestead exemption, or whether they were someone who was living in a secondary home, or a landlord, or whoever you're buying it from. But those numbers, when they start to shake out for you after you purchase based on the new price that you pay, they're becoming more and more difficult for people all over the country. Particularly, I wanted to bring up a market like Florida. In Florida, there is it's not potential anymore. It is a housing crisis. There's a housing crisis beginning to occur and has been going on here, particularly in the Gulf Coast, from Sarasota all the way down to Fort Myers. And, with the hurricanes that have hit in Florida back to back, in the last couple of years, and then also in the Gulf Coast in, Alabama, and, there's also Georgia and the Carolinas and stuff that are also experiencing this. But the majority of that comes down to, you only can generate so much rent in a market where you are, based on a lot of variables, but it's pretty consistent for a consumer who's not a real estate agent to find, housing statistics and resale prices and all that stuff on Zillow or Redfin or whatever, website that you choose to use. You can highlight, general areas or specific areas, and you can look at what inventory is available, how many days it's been on the market, what kind of activity that there is in the market's determined by how many days it's kind of there, and we came out of the COVID pandemic, which I believe was real and fake at the same time. But, there was a problem where people were shut into their houses and on lockdown, and a lot of things happened during that time. But then when we came out of that the other side of that and into 2021, obviously the interest rates dropped down to like mid, 2.5 to 3.5 to then 4, and it held steady. And people, because of that, who weren't buyers became buyers, and investors identified opportunity to, get money that the interest rates would be extremely low, which is almost like free money for an investor when you're seeing interest rates at 3% or less. I mean, or even 4% or less. That's like an extremely beneficial situation for an investor. And people took advantage of that. You had people that, bought their houses from 2009 to 2012, 13, whatever. They got an extremely good position of equity in their homes because they bought them at a value, and they were able to take advantage of interest rates that were very favorable. And then we went into like 2019. I remember the market was on fire then, and interest rates were reasonably good. I think they were around, at that time, they were around 5.75, like in that area ballpark wise. And then COVID came, everything shut down. Real estate people became non-essential. We were all sitting around wondering what to do. Lenders were focusing on the refinances because the interest rates dropped below, it was like historical record for how low those were. And the interest rate being so low, all these lending companies started hiring all these people, and they started focusing on doing refinances and stuff like that. And, people were attacking, and it was a big business, and these lenders were making money hand over fist, and they were also working with, buyers later on. But at first, there was a huge amount of people who were coming to take advantage of these low interest rates. And I was one of them. And a lot of people that I know were one of those people too, because I told them that they need to run out and take advantage of it. And other people were telling them that too. And people want general value because the cost of living has gotten extremely high, not particularly in Michigan versus other places, but here, the wages are lower, the cost of living is lower, and, the wages and the cost of living still they don't really line up. Like, no one's really getting ahead in any market. But in Michigan, you make lower money, the cost of living is lower, but doesn't mean that the bills aren't high versus how much you're bringing in. For a lot of people, it's difficult, just like it is in, big markets like Houston and Dallas and Los Angeles and, Phoenix and New York, Manhattan, Staten Island, Brooklyn, all those places. Like, it's extremely high to live, like on the East Coast in general. And that was a chance for people to get the most for their money by, trading a higher interest rate for a lower one, which saved them. And a lot of people were able to refinance from like a 30-year to a 15-year mortgage. And, their payment really didn't change that much, but now they're chipping down that principal on their house, which is ultimately what all of us should be focused on. running out and trying to put down as little as possible to get a 30-year mortgage on a house. I mean, you're going to pay on that thing for 10, 15 years before you even see real movement in the principal, which is not good. But, based on this market, we're in good shape. And I'll get back to that. But excuse me, I have a little tickle in my throat today. But I've been watching a lot of stuff about Florida. And I've been watching a lot of stuff about the Gulf Coast bordering, communities for Florida and other states that share that coastal region for the Gulf, or they call it the Gulf of America now, I guess, but you know what I'm saying. And the problem is now you've had a lot of these big entities that bought properties from 2009 when the market crashed all the way to pre-2019. Well, I'll say not 2019. Let's just call it like from 2009 to 2017, and they bought these houses and got very, very good equity positions. And then as we went through COVID and out the other side, the market exploded, as most of you know, and the values like doubled. It was ridiculous, and every deal was the highest and best. Landlords were still able to get good value in Detroit, but like in Florida, how do you really make money on a single family home that's $300,000 and the tenant pays like $2,000, and it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath home or something like that. Like, there's really no money there on a passive income side of it, but on appreciation, if you know that the market is scaling and you're going to make your money there, and that leads to a lot of investors in areas like LA or down in Florida where they're buying these properties for no passive income play. They're just playing the appreciation game because that's really all there is. But what happened is these big, investment real estate, rental type companies went in, they bought all this inventory, and then they rode it all the way through to, 2019. They had favorable interest rates. They had a great position on the price, what they paid for it. The rent started going up. We got into the pandemic. People, had to pump the brakes and they were scared. But as we came out the other side of that, then the market even exploded worse, even better, actually, upward. We went trending on the price. And with that, there was a shortage of inventory, which led to rents, going up to all-time highs. And, now these big companies, they were, gobbling up all this inventory in Florida. They were getting it all then. They had a great position of equity, or they had the houses paid for free and clear. They had higher rent than they've ever had, and they were actually making money. And everything was going really well. And everything lasted until, mid 2023, as interest rates started getting higher and higher and higher, then the deals, one, were more expensive than they should have been, that you can't really make money that way. And two, you got interest rates being so high that it's eating the meat off the bone. So when you add in like property tax and homeowners insurance and the payment with principal's interest, and then you also have, maintenance and property management, CapEx and all these different things, like now these properties became not as good of a deal. But the big dogs that bought houses before that, they were still sitting pretty. But for the newer investor, it became harder and harder. And then it became basically not lucrative at all to buy and hold a rental property in the Gulf Coast region, right? And all of that, led to where we are today. We get a bunch of hurricanes, natural disaster type stuff. It starts wiping out the Gulf Coast over and over and over again. Now insurance rates have gone up to the point where now with a mortgage and, taxes and insurance, like you're upside down to the point where it's not even lucrative. So now you have houses that are sitting and sitting and sitting, which is causing, sellers to have to reduce the price. You have rental properties that are sitting, which causes the landlords to drop the price of the rental. So now you're seeing decreases of 25, 30, 40%. And there's all this shadow inventory that exists. And now these bigger portfolios are now being affected because they're seeing the value of their properties overall going down because of all the other stuff that's happening. And now there's more inventory than there is buyers. And whenever you have more inventory for sale than you have people willing to buy, then it becomes a buyer's market. And then you as a seller have to start looking at dumping your price down or dumping your inventory off. And that's exactly what's going on right now in the region of Florida, particularly in the Gulf Coast and around that whole area, not just Florida, but other states as well. And you have these big companies that are holding thousands of homes, and now they're starting to say, well, we bought for, 150,000 and the market went to 350,000 and they had this huge position, but now those houses are going down to 300, then 250, then 225, then 200. And a lot of these big companies are dumping that inventory and trying to get their equity out of there. And when they do, and this is where I'm leading to, is the housing crisis here, maybe there it is. But when these big portfolios and these asset managers and people like that start to liquidate these investments, that doesn't mean they're going to be out of Florida forever. But with, homeowners insurance at $8,000, $10,000 in that area, which is a whole different conversation. Now it's like, why would we hold here? We need to find somewhere we can get better position on these properties, and we need to be able to make more money. And they start looking around, and as they sell off this inventory and all this shadow inventory starts coming to market, driving the price down even further, you're going to have some large entities like the BlackRocks that go in there, and they have the ability to buy these houses now on the dip and hold them and hold out, and they can absorb the loss. And it doesn't really affect them as much because in the grand scheme of things, they're going to make money in a lot of other ways, which offsets the losses that they have on the inventory that they're going to buy into now. But they're getting a value versus what it was a year ago, and that there's a play there, but not for the regular investor. That's not a play. But these big asset managers, I've already gotten a few calls from some of these type of people where they own hundreds or thousands of properties. And these people are getting their money out of Florida, and they're getting their money out of Alabama, and they're getting it out of Georgia and the Carolinas and some parts of Texas. And they're getting ready, even Louisiana, and they're getting ready very soon. Right now they're in strategy mode or whatever, and they're looking at like, where are we going to go and where are we going to dump this money where we can get value and we can make money on passive income as well, with also enjoying that appreciation swing. And that turns their head, and they look around all over the country. And again and again, I keep telling you guys, the Rust Belt, the Midwest, is the last real place in this country that you can buy a house for a really good price and rent it to the point where even if you hold it on a mortgage, you can get both appreciation annually, and you can also count on passive income every month. And these large corporate, landlords are going to come here and they're going to start buying houses here because versus where they just were, this is what they bought into. This price point, this rental amount is what they bought into after 2009. Right. So they're going to look into Michigan. They're going to look at Macomb, Oakland, Wayne County, Detroit. They're going to look at Flint. They're going to look at a lot of those things, and they're going to say, where do we best put our money? Like, where are we going to deploy this capital, and what is the best return on our investment? And time again, it's going to talk about the Detroit market, Metro Detroit market. We're going to be up there in that conversation all the time because of the price point and what you can get for your money. And the rents here are very favorable at the price points that we're offering compared to what they were just getting their money into, that they're now pulling it out and looking to deploy into these markets that we have now. What does that mean? Well, that means that the market in the Gulf Coast is going to crash, and they're going to need to do some stuff there. The state or the federal government's going to have to get involved and start plugging away at these insurance companies and forcing them to give rates that are favorable or affordable to consumers, because if they don't, you're going to have areas like Sarasota, for example. You have all these retirees that went down there, and it was affordable living, and then the price got really high, and they were holding out. But now, they can't even get homeowners insurance on their house, or they can't afford it at all. It's either because their house is in an area where insurance is not even possible to get, or their house is in a place where even if they got insurance, it's so expensive they can't afford it. And now you have these people who live there who are like, well, I'm retired. I took my life savings, sold all my stuff in Michigan or wherever they came from, and I came down here and I invested it into my retirement and my retirement home, and this is where I planned on being. And now they can't even get insurance on their house. So are they going to take the chance that another hurricane comes and, blows their house down like the big bad wolf, and they don't have any money to like rebuild, and they can't get insurance? Like that's not a gamble that you want to take at the age of retirement or post, 65. Like that's a gamble that most people aren't willing to take unless they're extremely rich and they don't care. But most people that live down there in those areas are not extremely rich. They're wealthy enough where they made fundamentally sound decisions in their life that led them to be able to enjoy that type of a life after the age of retirement. But they're certainly not going to go down there and take the chance with, not having insurance on their house and taking a chance at a hurricane coming through there and wiping out their house that they saved all their money for over their whole life and whatever. So that boom is going to come here in the Midwest, and particularly in the Detroit metro or Detroit city proper area, because it's favorable, while in other parts of the country, you got that in Florida where, obviously it's collapsing. It's already been happening. It's been occurring. People know about it. But also, if you look at other markets, like in California, just pick a spot, like it's become so unaffordable that people that are of average means can't even afford to buy a home at all. And also, not only are they having the problem with, the being able to afford houses and cost of living, they're depleting the resources there in California. It's desolate. There's a lot of areas that are under extreme drought all the time. They have all these fires and stuff. That's because they've depleted the resources in a lot of areas, and they don't have the water. They don't have the resources that they need for the environment to thrive and flourish, and they're experiencing the fallout from that. And also, there's been environmental changes. Where I was talking to my good friend Dr. Spencer Robinson, who is a professor at Eastern Michigan University, who is a doctor in real estate, which is what I want to be one day, but I'm not that smart. So I don't know if that'll ever happen. But what I do know, we were having a conversation today as we were going around through a particular neighborhood in Detroit and looking at making some power plays. He was telling me that, there's environmental changes that now these REITs are taken into consideration for long-term investment strategy, where they have to not only be able to look at natural disasters and things of that nature and the cost of insurance and particulars that involve those increases over time. They also have to consider environmental changes. And in California, there's been some environmental changes that are causing the wind to have shifted from where it would blow in from the ocean before. Now it's a more favorable wind that's coming from the desert direction, which is causing more erosion, more drought, and more desert-like conditions that are making, these areas catch fire and burn. And I'm not a scientist, but I've read enough and I've watched enough people that do know what they're talking about, who have talked about these type of things over and over again. And what does that mean? That means, again, Michigan is California during the gold rush. We have the resources. We have the lumber. We have the natural gas. We have water. Look around everywhere. We have water, and we have a growing economy that has somewhat stable jobs. Our unemployment is not very bad. We have taxes that are kind of high, but at the same time, versus other places, they're not that bad. And you can live here on a modest income. You can live a pretty average and decent life and be able to enjoy a lot of the things that Michigan has to offer. And slowly but surely, the winter of Michigan, which is only really bad for like January and February, and after that, it's really not that bad. It's kind of mild in this market. I don't mind it at all. It doesn't bother me. I'm outside all the time. The only time that I really don't want to be outside is when it's like, mid-January, like how we had temperatures this year and snow, which was extreme. We had extreme cold and we had extreme amount of snow and bad weather and stuff and high wind. But normally it's really not that bad. And the only couple of months that we have that's cold, you just make fundamentally sound clothing decisions and you'll be fine. And a lot of people adapt. But I will say, you look around when things start becoming unaffordable, which they are, and interest rates become extremely high, which they are, and you have a lot of, we have a lack of inventory, which we actually have. It becomes difficult now, these people to live in certain places. The amount of money that you have to generate just to live an average life, you can live like a king in Michigan. And over again, people are going to see that. And now you're going to have these big companies from Florida that are going to come in and start buying inventory, which is going to create more opportunity for like them to, boost the market, supply and demand. The less houses that we have, the more people are fighting over them. The more they're fighting over them, the higher that they go, the higher that they sell, the more money that everybody gets when they live in their certain neighborhoods that they live in. And that's just the way it is, right? Reality. So is there going to be a housing crisis? Is it here? Is the bust here? Yeah, it's starting. There's a particular line in the direction of Florida and the Gulf Coast, that it's beginning, and there's going to be fallout from that, and people are already talking about it. It's become a very common topic of conversation for particular people that I follow on YouTube and stuff, that I really do know that they know what they're talking about, or else I wouldn't pay attention to them, and I enjoy watching their stuff. I'm not going to drop any names because they're not paying me. Let's be honest. I'm just kidding. But no, I'm not going to drop any names because this is the Detroit Buy, Hold, Invest podcast. We only talk about specifics to Detroit and people in Detroit, and that's what we want to showcase. So we're not going to talk about those people on the YouTubes that say all these things. Just know that I research them and they make sense, and I read a lot of stuff online, and I always make sure that I double and triple check. And speaking of online, I want to get into a couple of little tidbits of factual evidence. Particularly, I was looking at an article on Yahoo Finance, and it says why Detroit is the best city to buy a house for under $100K. And as I'm skimming through it, there's some points that I saw that I wanted to make note of. Number one is Detroit's citywide revitalization efforts. Over the past decade, Detroit has undertaken a series of focused revitalization efforts to restore its economic base. The city has launched various redevelopment projects, infrastructure improvements, community programs through partnerships with public and private sectors and nonprofit organizations. According to the report by World Economic Forum, job growth is back, and it sits at 6% over the last 10 years. 6% growth each year over the last 10 years, while the growth of the prime age adult population in greater Detroit downtown is even larger at 18%. It's gone up 18%. Last year was the first year we had a population increase in Detroit since like 1957 or 1958. But in the area of Metro Detroit, like, population has been increasing overall, and now Detroit is even in growth mode. The flight days are over. There's so much good stuff going on down there, so much redevelopment in there. And if you don't go to Detroit all the time, you don't know this, but like when you go to New Center, you go to downtown like I do, there is a lot of construction going on. A lot of big, expensive, multi-million-dollar commercial development is occurring in Detroit. When that happens, these people don't just build stuff hoping that it's going to work out. They project this stuff over a 10 and 15 and 30 year, perspective. Like, they're not going to put all this money. So there's a lot of great developments that are going on, and they've also gotten millions and millions of dollars to do like neighborhood redevelopment, infrastructure improvements, and they have come up with ways to like highlight specific areas and make living and working and walking areas and stuff. And like stuff like that it didn't happen in my whole life. It used to be this way back in the day when my grandparents lived in Detroit, when they came over here, when all the Belgians came over here, and they, and all the other nationalities and stuff kind of immigrated into Detroit in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. And it was booming, and you had, the cobblestone streets, and you had, all the major industry in Detroit, and it was all happening, and everybody had to live in Detroit. It's where you wanted to be. It was the most developed place. It was a huge economy. There was millionaires being made all the time, and there was all this great stuff going on. That's where people were, but we went through a period of time after the riots, particularly the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, where Detroit just went down and down and down and down. It became desolate and dangerous, and, so many blighted homes and crime and drugs. And, it was just, you talk about a city that was upwards of almost 2 million people, and they dropped down to like 700,000 people. And they have that same problem in Flint. There was so many people, and now they've left, and there's just no way that they'll ever populate these areas that they have, and they just deteriorate and depreciate, and the houses just get overrun and blighted, and they burn down, and they get turned into drug houses, and they get just boarded and left to rot. And, eventually someone's got to come in and start tearing those down, and you got to create an economy that supports the growth. And Detroit has been doing that ever since Mike Duggan came in as the mayor. The boom has began, and it's been happening. People try to deny it. I saw a guy on a Facebook group. I'm on a real estate investor group that said, people say that Detroit is overrated. Is that true? And people were like, oh, yeah, Detroit sucks. And, oh, yeah, anyone who invests there is stupid. And, investors that invest there, they don't know what they're doing. And I'm like, I sold over 200 properties there last year. I literally commented and said, I sold well over 200 properties in Detroit in 2024. I'm already off to a great start in 2025. I'm just going to keep it real with you. If Detroit was overrated or Detroit didn't have money to be made, then I wouldn't be able to sell this many houses. And I will also say that 90% at least of the clients that I have in this Detroit market are coming from everywhere but Detroit. I only have a very small handful of people that are local that buy. And that's the mentality. That's like the you can be famous everywhere but your hometown philosophy, the crabs in the bucket thing. You can go and create a product in your market and no one will respond to it if they know you, but you go to another market and you become a hero. Like that's what's going on here in this market. You got local people who just keep on remembering about when Detroit wasn't good and they keep on trying to say that, but what they don't understand is that the majority of people that are coming here from outside of Detroit can't even touch anything even close to as good as we have to offer in their home market. So when they're looking at Detroit, they're looking at a fire sale. They're looking at, extremely good opportunity versus where they are, where people here are like, oh, I would never pay $85,000 for a house over there. I used to buy those for $10,000. Well, you know what? You never did, even though you could. And if you would have, you'd be a millionaire right now instead of sitting on an internet group trying to pretend like you knew what you were doing at one time, but you didn't. Because if you did, you'd have a whole bunch of houses and you'd be wealthier than hell. And we wouldn't be talking to you on no internet forum because you'd be off living your life on your yacht and you're taking your private plane down to Belize or wherever the hell you wanted to go because it wouldn't matter, right? So you got to consider the sources. But at the end of the day, we've built an entire business around providing affordable and safe houses for buy and hold, for flips, for burrs, and the like, and apartment buildings, for commercial development, like all these things. And all these people that come here come from other markets and they're glad to pay top dollar here because they know they've seen the projection over a 10, 15, 20 years in their market. And they understand if they buy for a lot of money now is not going to be a lot of money when you look at the price of what it is in 10 years. I mean, I got a guy right now, I'm getting ready to put out a 10-unit apartment building, fully performing. It has like one unit that needs a tenant place, but these units are generating like, $750 to $850 a unit. There's 8 1-bedroom and there's 2 2-bedrooms and those get more. But the moral of the story is like this guy is going to sell for $649,000 for 10 units. Someone locally will say that's extreme and no, you can't make any money off this. And like $650,000 for an apartment building in Detroit, that's ridiculous. Where in the hell else are you going to find a 10-unit apartment building in this country for anywhere close to that? Some guy in California or New York or Miami or Houston or, anywhere, any big city, Boston, they're going to look at that and be like, wow, I haven't seen an apartment building, a 10-unit for $650,000 since like in my life or since I was in my 20s and now they're 50 years old or 60 years old. So all the naysayers, that's just what they do. They naysay. Most of them are not an expert. Excuse me. Most of them are not experts. Most of them don't know what the hell they're talking about. And a lot of people who invest or who claim to be investors, when they go onto these type of places, over time, if you pay attention to the things they say, you start to realize that they're really not what they pretend to be, and they give it away. People just don't follow them enough to realize it. But the guy who's the loudest, the one that's always making comments, eventually someone catches it, and then they basically just laugh them off the group, and then their credibility is pretty much done. But people do this all the time. They give advice about rental properties. They don't own a single one. They give advice about investment and they don't invest themselves. They give advice about real estate and they don't sell enough houses to really be in a position to do that. They give advice to people about family life and their family's all messed up. They tell people that they shouldn't smoke weed or drink, and then on the weekends or every night they're having beers and smoking weed or whatever. Like, this is what the reality is, in life. And you have to just kind of discern I guess you have to be as calculated as you can in who you listen to and why you listen to them. And you also have to make sure that you do your research on people before you let your ears really open up, because you don't want to like take in a bunch of opinions that aren't factual, because it takes away from your ability to filter in the stuff that actually makes sense, that your life could be changed by, or you could benefit yourself by following it. So always be conscious of that. But the second thing I wanted to say is, another reason why they say that Detroit's a great opportunity is low home prices plus the appreciation, which I keep saying. There's plenty of sub $100,000 houses in the market of Detroit. It's not uncommon to find single family homes less than $10,000, depending on the area that you go. Some people like to play that less than savory investment. Some of those areas are not as appealing as others, and to each their own, right? But there's a lot of people in this country that love to come in here and buy those cheap land bank $1,000 houses. They love to buy the 48205-esque, $40,000, $30,000, $20,000 house in a questionable environment, depending on who you are, I guess. It could be a little rough. Some people aren't used to that. They're not desensitized to an urban environment, let's say. So those can be dangerous for some, and for others, they love playing the game, and more power to them, right? But according to Zillow, the typical home value in Detroit has increased by over 10% over the last year. Every neighborhood. Some of them more. Some of them 12, 15, 20%. Just depends. As revitalization efforts continue and sections of Detroit continue to develop, the prospects for appreciation remain strong. This appreciation factor alone makes the city an appealing market for investors looking to capitalize on long-term gains in real estate. Another thing is lower renovation prices, which is also true. In Detroit, renovation prices are significantly cheaper than they are in other cities. The key reason is because we have lower labor and material costs. Detroit in general is a lower cost of living area, which means that things are cheaper. And investors love the prices in Detroit versus their hometowns in a lot of cases. A guy doing a rehab for you on a house in Detroit versus a guy doing a rehab for you in Manhattan, totally different prices. A guy, doing a rehab in Roseville for you versus a guy doing a rehab in, San Jose, California, totally different prices. And a lot of people like that. And it's definitely something to consider. We have a lot of subsidies, grants, and incentives, such as the opportunity zones, where you can use a QOF to buy properties and essentially become capital gain exempt after a 10-year period of time. That's through the state of Michigan, through the MISHDA program. There's plenty for homeowners. There's like the Detroit Home Buyer Program, where they give you thousands and thousands of dollars. In some cases, like, you only come to closing with $1,000 out of pocket for a retail person to buy their own home. You have banks like Bank of America and Huntington Bank and Flagstar Bank that offer like true zero down programs. There's all these different grants that you can get as a buyer when you're on the retail side. So there's a lot of advantages there, and there's a lot of subsidies and stuff that you can get as an investor as well. We could do that for another time. There's a lot of variety of areas to invest in. Detroit has mansions. The mansion market here for people that want to buy is extremely affordable, and the play on appreciation is absolutely good. And the cost of it versus other markets is not even comparable. We're just way cheaper, and you get the same type of house. I mean, let's face it. I know people in LA that live in 1,200 square foot houses. They're like $1.4 million. You can buy a house like that here for, between 150 and, as high as you really want to go. But on average, I'll say between 150 and 280,000 in pretty much any area that you want to live. You could buy a ranch, 1,200 square foot with a garage and a basement. And in California, I mean, that could be $1 million, $1.5 million, even $2 million, depending on where you live. And that's definitely an advantage. So people I know that are out in California that make a lot of money, their cost of living makes it to where they're not really doing that well because they don't have a lot of extra income, because all their income goes toward their car, their insurance, and their house and stuff, which is not very smart, but it's how they live there. They could come to Michigan and live like an absolute king. You could live on the water, have a boat, and drive a Lamborghini if you want to, and you can afford it compared to what it costs to live in some of these other areas. So the variety of area that we have, from the $50,000 house all the way up to like the houses that are worth $1 million or more, it's all here in Detroit, which is it's not the case in every city. You don't have like mansions in Flint. You don't have mansions, in certain cities. Let's just say that. So that's the biggest draw. And, some of the other things in Florida, they say as of 2024, the average cost of homeowners insurance in Florida is projected to be approximately $11,759, reflecting a 7% increase from the previous year. This figure is significantly higher than the national average at about $2,377, right? $2,377 is a national average. The Florida average is $11,759. Now, when you talk about insurance in Michigan, the average cost of homeowners insurance in Michigan is about $1,258. That's it. $104.88 a month. I mean, What else do you need to know? Is there going to be a boom in this market? Absolutely. It's coming. This is the time. I keep saying it all the time. This is the time. If you're going to be an investor, if you're going to do something to change your life, if you want to make a decision that's going to affect you greatly, that's going to improve your quality of life and your ability to retire and potentially have that generational wealth that you're looking for, Detroit is the gold rush of California. It is 2025. This window will start to close when these big entities start pulling out of areas like Florida and redeploying their money into this market. It's going to cause the market to increase. The only thing that holds it back is the cost of living here being low is, that's generated because the wages here are low in perspective of the other part of the country. If the economy begins to grow, then these jobs will be created. People will be able to make more and the cost of living will go up. We have the resources here. We have the water. We have the outdoors. We have, all 4 seasons where people can enjoy all the summertime and boating activities. They can enjoy hunting and fishing in the spring and the fall and the summer. They can go snow skiing and snowmobiling and riding 4-wheelers and side-by-sides and doing all that stuff. And then you have people that love to ice fish, and you can do that too. So you get it all here. Michigan's not for everybody. It's definitely not for everybody. But for people that enjoy the things that Michigan has to offer, this is one of the best places to live. I mean, there really is not many other places that have the job growth potential. They have the housing market potential. And we're not even really building houses here. It's going to get to the point where they're going to start to build houses in Detroit. They're going to start to build houses to accommodate the population increase. And things are going to change, and they're going to change for the better. And if you buy in right now, if you start buying now and you start making these decisions now and you do it the same way that you do your 401k, when you work a job as Johnny Clock Puncher, you're putting money in and you're putting money in and you're hoping that, one day if you continue to do that and the market goes up like it's supposed to, and you see that capitalization of your money and you see it growing and growing, that at the point where you look to retire, you'll have enough money to retire and everything will be good. You can draw Social Security as extra income and you can go off to live your life until you die. And that's what everybody hopes for. Right now, you could get into a position where you can buy these properties, get them, and by the time that you're retired, you have properties that are paid for free and clear, and they're cash flowing, and you'll have the opportunity at that point to sell those properties and liquidate that money, or continue to hold those properties and enjoy that passive income to pass those properties down to your loved ones so that they can have a piece of that generational wealth that you've built over the course of your life. And if you don't get started doing that right now, it's going to be too late. Eventually, it's going to be too late. So anyway, I appreciate all of you. Please like, follow, subscribe. Appreciate you joining Detroit Buy Hold Invest. You can go on my website, www.detroitbuyholdinvest.com. You can call me on my cell phone, 313-451-0448. Clyde Realty is the other name in the game. Gotta love it. Please come back, listen to me more. Appreciate you guys following. Appreciate y'all listening to me. Have a good day. Detroit 2025. This should be what you're looking at. We out.